My name is Eveline Hartmann, 72 years old, retired accountant, widow, and still foolish enough to believe that kindness always makes its way back. I've lived in Asheville my whole life, long enough to know that family gatherings can look a lot like balance sheets, everyone pretending the numbers add up when they don't. The reunion was Amara's idea. She said it was time to celebrate together again, and she'd rented a big cedar-sided lodge near Lake Junaluska. There were checkered tablecloths, cold lemonade, the smell of barbecue in the air. I wore my favorite blue shawl, the one my late husband gave me before his last concert. It made me feel steady, safe. I didn't expect much, just a pleasant afternoon. Maybe a photo or two where everyone smiled without pretending. Amara was radiant that day. Hair pinned back, white sundress catching the mountain light. Her husband, Darren, stayed close beside her, hand firm on her shoulder. They'd both done well, or rather, I'd done well for them. For 9 years, I had covered their mortgage, taxes, and more than a few emergencies. It was never spoken of. I didn't need thanks. I just wanted her to stand strong. When she tapped her glass for attention, the chatter softened. "I just want to say," she began, laughter already in her voice, "how lucky I am to have this man. Darren has always supported me, in everything." Glasses clinked. Someone whistled. Then she looked around the room. 52 people. All of them family. And her eyes landed on me, the other one. She said lightly, "Has never lifted a finger." The air changed. A few uneasy smiles. One small laugh cut short. My breath caught, not from shock exactly, but from the strange, clean silence that followed. I felt every year of my life settle in my chest. I folded my napkin, set it beside my plate, and rose. "Excuse me," I said softly. That was all. No argument. No defense. I walked out past the porch lights, down the gravel path toward the parking lot. Behind me, the music started again. Someone cheered for another toast. I kept walking. The night air cool against my face. The sound of clinking glasses fading as the mountains swallowed the noise. The mountains looked softer in the rain, their outlines fading into mist as I followed the winding road down from Junaluska. The wipers beat a slow rhythm against the windshield, steady as breath. I didn't cry. I thought I would, but instead, I felt hollow, as if someone had quietly swept out every corner of me and left the lights on. The tail lights ahead blurred red through the drizzle. I kept my hands firm on the wheel, letting the motion steady me. The dashboard clock glowed 8:43. I'd been sitting at that table barely an hour, but somehow it felt like I'd aged another decade. 9 years. That's how long I'd been sending payments on Amara's mortgage, first as a temporary favor, then as habit, then as something too quiet to name. Every month. Like clockwork. I logged in, moved the money, closed the laptop. No announcement. No signature. Groceries when the fridge was empty. Dental bills when insurance failed. A roof repair that couldn't wait. My name was never on a single receipt, but my fingerprints were everywhere. A sign flickered through the rain, Blue Ridge Diner open late. I pulled in and sat in the parking lot for a moment before going inside. The smell of coffee and fried onions hit me. Sharp, but comforting. I took a booth near the window, ordered tea, and watched the reflection of the highway slide across the glass. At the next table, a young couple sat close together, whispering over their half-eaten pie. I caught one word: boundaries. The woman said it softly, like a discovery. The man nodded, eyes down, guilty. I stirred my tea, the spoon clinking against porcelain. Boundaries. It sounded cold at first, then honest. Maybe silence wasn't love. Maybe it was just what I'd used to make the world comfortable for everyone but me. Outside, the rain slowed to a drizzle. I left $1 beside the untouched tea, stepped back into the night, and kept driving east toward Asheville. where the lights on my porch would still be waiting. The house was still when I came home, the kind of stillness that hums in the corners. I hung my shawl on the chair, turned on one lamp, and sat at the kitchen table where the mail had piled up like a slow confession. The light caught the edges of old folders and envelopes marked confirmation and statement available. For once, I didn't look away. I pulled everything toward me, with the bank records, check stubs, printed receipts from my online transfers, 9 years of quiet arithmetic. The papers fanned out across the table like pages from a second life I'd been living behind my daughters. Each line told a story. Mortgage. June 2017. $1 to $276.12. That was the month Amara called crying about Darren losing his job. Medical payment, March 2019. $460. The dentist had refused to start treatment until the balance cleared. Property tax. 2020, $2,330. I'd sold my sapphire ring that spring to make that one. My handwriting wavered as I added the totals: mortgage, utilities, groceries, insurance premiums. When I reached the last line, the sum looked unreal. $182,000.47. The number sat there, neat and indifferent. While my mind filled with flashes, Amara laughing under Christmas lights, me counting out bills to keep the heat on, the letter from the bank confirming the loan extension I'd signed for them in secret. Every memory pressed down like ink, bleeding through paper. I leaned back, the chair creaking beneath me, and felt the weight shift from pain to something colder clarity. I'd kept their life afloat out of love, but love had turned into obligation so gradually, I hadn't noticed the undertow. I took a yellow highlighter, drew a single line beneath the total, and wrote in steady letters, paid in full. The clock ticked toward midnight. I closed the folder, set it aside, and felt something inside me finally balance. Morning came gray and thin, light barely touching the kitchen tiles. I woke to the faint vibration of my phone on the counter, a sound that felt almost shy at first, then relentless. I poured water into the kettle before looking. 38 missed calls. The list ran down the screen: Amara, Darren, then the home number I used to save as family. I didn't rush to call back. The kettle clicked, steam rising like a patient breath. Outside, fog hung low over the ridge, softening the edges of everything. I took my time grinding the coffee beans, letting the rhythm of the motion settle me. By the time the phone rang again, I already knew what it would be about. There are certain tones of panic you recognize after years of cleaning up other people's messes. I answered on the third ring. Mom Amara's voice cracked between guilt and outrage. They said the mortgage payment bounced. The card didn't go through. We can't check in for our trip. The reservation's been canceled. What's happening? I stirred sugar into my coffee, the spoon clinking against the mug. That must be a surprise, I said softly. Did the bank make a mistake? Darren's furious. He says you were supposed to. I was, I said, cutting gently across her words. For 9 years, I was supposed to. Then, last night, you told 52 people I never lifted a finger. So I decided to rest my hands. For a long moment, all I heard was the thin whine of the line, then a small, disbelieving laugh. Mom, that's not funny. No, I said. It isn't. Another silence. I pictured her in that house, the one I'd paid to keep standing barefoot on the tile. Suddenly realizing how much of it depended on me. I'll let you sort it out, I said quietly. It's time you did. I ended the call, turned off the kettle that had started to hum again, and carried my coffee to the porch. The air smelled of pine and rain. For the first time in years, I let myself sit still and do nothing at all. By noon, the sky had cleared enough for sunlight to spill across the porch, turning the wet boards silver. I'd just finished washing the breakfast cup when a sharp knock rattled the front door. I knew the rhythm of that knock before I even turned the handle. Amara stood there, hair pulled back, eyes red around the edges. She wasn't wearing makeup, which told me she hadn't come to perform only to plead. "Mom, can I come in?" I stepped aside without a word. She walked straight to the kitchen table, the same one where my ledger still lay closed. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then her voice broke the quiet. "This has gone too far. People are calling, the bank's confused, and Darren's furious. You could have told me instead of cutting us off like this. It was just a misunderstanding." I sat down opposite her. "Was it?" She looked at me, startled. "You know I didn't mean it like that. It was a joke." "Mom, a stupid one." I opened the folder, sliding a single page toward her. $182,000, I said evenly. "That's what my fingers did. Amara, mortgage, taxes, bills, every quiet rescue you never noticed." She glanced at the numbers, then pushed the paper away as if it burned. "You're throwing that in my face after everything we've been through. I'm showing you the truth," I said. "It doesn't need to be thrown. It's heavy enough on its own." Her jaw tightened, eyes flashing with something between guilt and anger. "You'd humiliate me like this." I shook my head. "No. You did that part yourself." The silence that followed felt like a door closing somewhere deep inside the house. Amara stood abruptly, chair scraping the floor. She moved toward the exit, hand trembling on the doorknob. "You don't know what you've started," she said. When the door slammed, the sound echoed through every room. I sat back down, tracing the grain of the table where her hands had just been. Humiliation, I thought, looks different from this side of the door. The first message came from my cousin Lydia, short and nervous. "You've seen Amara's post, right?" She'd attached screenshots before I could answer. At the top of the feed sat my daughter's smiling profile picture, and beneath it, her neat little paragraph. "Some people turn money into control. Real family gives love, not bills." The words were polished, almost poetic. I could imagine her reading them out loud to Darren before hitting post. Proud of the tone, proud of the crowd that would nod along. Dozens of hearts and sympathy comments followed people who hadn't spoken to me in years suddenly offering her comfort. "You deserve peace. Toxic parents never see it." I made tea before opening the next notification. Another cousin, then a niece, each sending the same question. "Is this about you?" The truth was, I didn't need to answer. Everyone already knew. The reunion story had floated around in whispers all week. In a small town like Asheville, rumor spreads faster than smoke through pine. I walked to the table where my ledger still lay, its pages marked with highlighter and quiet arithmetic. I turned to a blank sheet, placed my phone beside it, and took a photo. Just one. The totals were blurred, but the dates were clear. 9 years of payments, the steady trail of every rescue. I opened my own Facebook account, silent for months, and typed, documenting, not debating. That was all. I posted the image and set the phone aside. By evening, the comments under Amara's post had slowed, replaced by the quiet confusion that comes when certainty starts to shift. Lydia texted again, "You didn't have to say a word. Everyone saw it." I didn't reply. I only watched the sun dip behind the Blue Ridge Hills, painting the sky in slow, forgiving color. In the hush that followed, my name stayed unspoken. But for the first time in years, it didn't need defending. Weeks slipped by quietly, each one carrying its own kind of silence. The calls stopped. The messages thinned, and the digital storm that Amara had stirred died out faster than it had begun. In small towns, gossip burns bright, but brief people move on to fresher fires. From neighbors, I heard fragments. The power at Amara's house had been cut twice before she managed to pay the minimum. The water bill followed. Darren, restless and cornered, took a contract job in Tennessee just for a few months. He'd said, but no one believed he'd be back soon. The lawn grew wild. The porch paint peeled in strips that flapped like small flags in the wind. One afternoon, on my way back from the market, I took the long road past their cul-de-sac. Just once. The house looked smaller than I remembered, hollow somehow, as if it had forgotten the sound of laughter. A single light flickered in the front window, the kind of weak bulb that can't decide whether to live or die. I parked half a block away and sat for a moment, hands resting on the steering wheel. My grocery bag lay on the seat beside me, and from it I pulled a small envelope. Inside was a $50 gift card to the local market. No note, no name, just the small square of help I couldn't quite keep to myself. I walked to the mailbox and slipped it through the slot. The sound it made paper brushing metal was almost nothing, but it felt heavier than any check I'd ever written. Driving away, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. The lines on my face seemed softer than before, though I couldn't tell if it was mercy or exhaustion. Behind me, the house faded into the blur of rain-streaked glass. A shadow I wasn't sure I'd ever fully escape, but one I no longer felt responsible to rebuild. The evening settled over Asheville like a slow exhale, the kind that carried both peace and warning. I was closing the kitchen window when I heard footsteps on the gravel path 3 sets. Uneven, hesitant. When I opened the door, they were already there. Amara stood in front, pale and trembling, her hands twisted in the hem of her sweater. Darren lingered behind her, eyes down, and beside him stood Raymond, my ex-husband, who hadn't set foot on my porch since the divorce 20 years ago. The sight of the 3 of them together was strange, like ghosts who'd forgotten their order of haunting. "Mom," Amara said softly, "we're sorry. We didn't think." Her voice cracked on the last word, and for a moment, I almost believed she might still be that child who used to fall asleep on my lap during summer storms. But memory doesn't erase arithmetic. I stepped onto the porch, closing the door behind me. "You did think," I said. "You just thought I'd keep paying." Darren shifted, his shoulders collapsing inward. Raymond cleared his throat as if to speak, then stopped when I met his eyes. I saw the same quiet guilt there that had followed him out of our marriage, the habit of letting silence do his defending. Amara's tears fell fast now. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I was trying to look strong in front of everyone. You thought I'd always catch you." I finished for her, and I did, until I couldn't anymore. She nodded, head bowed, the sound of her crying blending with the crickets starting up in the yard. I let the quiet stretch before I spoke again. "You can rebuild trust, Amara, but not on my bank account. Not this time." No one argued. They just stood there, framed by the last light of day. 3 people finally understanding what it cost to mistake love for obligation. When they turned to leave, I stayed on the porch, watching until their figures dissolved into dusk, the air cool and steady against my skin. Winter passed quietly, leaving behind the faint scent of pine and wood smoke. By early spring, I decided it was time to begin again. The old house too large, too full of echoes went on the market. I packed slowly, room by room, folding away the life I had built for others. Every drawer held some reminder of years spent keeping people comfortable. When the realtor's sign finally went up, I didn't look back. I found the cottage by chance, a single-story brick home near the French Broad River, hidden behind dogwood trees just beginning to bloom. It was small but sunlit, the kind of place that didn't need saving. The first time I stepped inside, I could hear the river murmuring through the open window. It sounded like a promise. On moving day, I brought only what mattered: a few books, my husband's cello, the blue shawl, and a brass plate I'd ordered from a craftsman downtown. I mounted it beside the door myself, drilling the screws until the metal caught the light just right. The engraving read, "Home by effort, not obligation." It felt different, claiming a space built only for me, no hidden debts, no silent expectations. The quiet here wasn't emptiness, it was earned. A few weeks later, a neighbor named Iris stopped by from the local art co-op, inviting me to join their weekend pottery group. I almost declined, then found myself saying yes. The first time I touched the clay, it yielded under my palms. Cool and heavy, the wheel turned. And my hands, those same hands that had written checks, signed transfers, held on to people too long, began to shape something of their own. When the vase finally stood upright, uneven but whole, I brushed a thumb along its rim. The clay was imperfect, but it was mine. Outside, the river kept its steady rhythm, carrying everything that no longer belonged to me away toward open water. The mornings by the river had grown gentle, each one beginning with the soft sound of current against stone and the faint hum of birds waking in the dogwoods. I'd fallen into a rhythm coffee at dawn, clay under my nails by mid-morning, the quiet satisfaction of a day built with my own hands. That morning, an envelope waited on the porch, pale against the dark wood. I knew the handwriting before I picked it up. Amara's script was still careful. Every letter shaped like an apology that had taken its time to arrive. Inside was a single sheet. The ink had smudged in one corner where a tear must have fallen. "Mom, I understand now what your love cost. I hope one day I can repay you not with money, but with effort. I'm trying." No signature. She didn't need one. I carried the letter to the kitchen and laid it beside the old ledger I'd kept all these years. The paper edges had yellowed, but the numbers were still there, each one a quiet monument to choices I'd made without anyone asking. For a moment, I let my fingers rest between the two pages, one for what was given, one for what was finally understood. "Then maybe," I murmured, "you'll start lifting your own." Outside, sunlight stretched across the window, bright and unhurried. I moved to the pottery wheel, pressing my foot to the pedal until it began to turn. The clay yielded under my palms, smooth and steady, spinning toward something new. My wrists caught the light, thin lines, firm tendons, the map of a life that had built and broken and begun again. The air smelled faintly of river water and earth. I shaped the clay taller, let it breathe beneath my hands. And for the first time in years, I realized I wasn't holding anything up but my own life.